Hi everyone, welcome to the first of these junior cycle exam prep classes that I'm going to run with you. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to jump straight into it and I'm going to start on the 2024 paper. So the chat function is open, so make sure you're sending in any questions you have on that. I'll keep an eye on that as I go through it and get back to anything as it comes up during the class this evening or this afternoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into question 3 because I've pre-recorded question 1 and question 2, which will be made available to you later on. If we get time, I'll go back through them so as you can see me going through the questions and you can ask any questions live on that you need to go through. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with question 3. So all you need is the 2024 paper and just a copy, just take down a few notes. Over to the side of the screen, I'm going to show you the little notes section that I'd like you to use as you're going through it. And that'll kind of really help you kind of picking out the parts of the question that you need to answer and making sure you have kind of your own little set of notes built up as you go through them. So we'll work down through it. And then the only other thing that you'll need really is your maths tables. Now, if you don't have your maths tables, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world if you don't have them today, all right? We can have a look back and I'll reference anything that you need from them anyway. I'll copy them in to OneNote. And then after the class, what we'll do is we'll make a PDF available of the fully worked solutions for you and we can go through it from there. So remember, this is just to enhance what you're already doing, the great work that you're already doing in class. It's just a quick run through the 2024 paper, just because you mightn't have had a chance to do revision yet on exam paper questions. So we just want to make sure that you get a good shot at this when it's coming up to the mocks. What I'll try and do then is I'll try and link it back to the ways they could ask this, how they could change the question from year to year. So a couple of things like that. So as we go through it anyway, we'll keep an eye on what's happening. But as I said, keep an eye on the chat, keep questions coming in and I can get back to you, okay? So let's make a start on this. So question 3 from last year's paper then. So Tomas works as a chef in a restaurant. The table below shows the hours he worked one weekend. Now, what happens with students is they sometimes just tear off into a question and they don't actually answer what's asked in the question in a particular year, okay? They kind of go, oh yeah, I saw something like that before. Is it a similar question? And they just answer what they think is actually on the page. So what I would do is I just have a highlighter and you're saying, right, how much in total did Tomas earn for working? And it's Friday and Saturday. So make sure you're answering the correct thing, okay? So lay out your work so your examiner can give you the partial credits as you go through it, all right? So you're saying Friday and Saturday. So get the number of hours written down first. So you're 7 plus 8. So you're saying 15 hours worked. And then what's the rate? Okay, so 15 by 19. And you have your working shown then, and that's absolutely enough to pick up the full credit on that. So put in your answer then, so it's 285. Okay, so that's the first one done, nice and simple. Next part then, Tomas is paid 50% extra for working on Sunday. How much did he earn for working on Sunday? So again, make sure you're answering what they're asking, okay? So 50% extra, and then it's Sunday that we're talking about, okay? So let's go through this nice and slowly. So the 50% extra, right, the place that I've seen mistakes come up here is students read it and say, yeah, brilliant, I recognise that it's 50% extra, but they calculate 50% but forget to add it on to the original 19 euro that he was getting, okay? So make sure you do that properly. So you're saying 19 euro multiplied by 1.5, and that's going to give you your rate of pay. And I'll explain why I'm setting up the workings this way in a second, all right? So you come along and you're saying, Tomas is going to get 28 euro 50 per hour. You'll notice I'm not worried about units until I get to the very end, all right? So 28.50, and then look at the number of hours. So on Sunday, it's 6 hours. So we have 6 hours at 28 euro and 50 cents. And again, you've shown absolutely everything to get the full marks on that. And then on your calculator, you're 6 by 28.50. So you're coming in there with 171. Okay, now a couple of things. How could they change this around? Okay, what could happen here? All right, so if you think about what they're actually examining, they're examining percentages here. So here you have a 50% increase. What if there was a reduction? Okay, so what if they said the company's in trouble, they have to reduce wages by, say, 20%. So little things like that. So just a little note here, okay? If it's extra, all right, so here when it was 50% extra, we were multiplying by 1.50, okay? What if it was a reduction though? What if it was reduced by 20%, say? All right, so just make sure you can see that on the screen. A reduction of 20%, that would mean you're getting 80% of what was there, okay? So you'd multiply by 0.8. So little things like that. You're trying to say to yourself, right, I'm practicing the 2024 question, but how could they change it? What could they ask me that could be slightly different that I need to keep an eye on, okay? And it's really, really important that you're watching the wording of the question as you go through these, all right? So then the next part on this question, all right? So they've examined kind of basic multiplication, they've examined percentages, and now they're looking at examining your tax, all right? So you come along here, and Tomas's gross income was 1,900 last month. He pays tax at a rate of 20%. So you're identifying what's going to happen here. So 20%, a tax credit of 31250, and we have to work out the net income. So the first thing you're going to do is get the gross tax, okay? So the gross tax, his gross income was 1,900 and he pays tax at a rate of 20%. So 20%. So again, 1,900 times 0.2. So again, I will keep saying to you, do not do any of these in your head, go to your calculator, okay? So 380 there. Next part, okay, your tax credit. So what do they mean by this tax credit, okay? So the tax credit, I don't have to pay tax on this particular amount, all right? So it's a tax credit. So to get your tax payable, all we're doing is we're coming along and we're saying 380 minus your 31250. And again, I'll go back through these workings to explain why we're going to lay them out in relation to partial credits as well, okay? So we're saying that our tax payable is €67.20. And then what is the net income? So all I'm doing is taking my 380 and I'm subtracting €67.20. Okay, quick question in there. Can we be asked two different rates of tax? Yes, okay. So at higher level you can. You could be given the standard rate of tax, okay, and then you could have the higher tax. So what I'll do is I'll do a really quick example of that for you in 1 second, okay? So to finish off this one, the 380 minus the 67.20, okay, we're coming along and we're saying what's actually going to happen here, okay? So sorry, not net income there, your tax payable when you work it out. We have our 380 minus the 67.20. So we know that it's 67.20, and then to get the net income, your 1,900 is what you earned, and then you're knocking off that tax payable. So 1,900 minus the 67.20. Okay, and we're coming along and we're saying that the total income there, and make sure you have your euro sign in on it now because it's your final answer, 1832.80 coming in there. Okay, right, so to go back to that question, so about the different rates of tax. So you can see 2024, you were just asked the standard rate of tax. Nothing to stop them from putting in the higher rate of tax this time. So if that happens, okay, so the standard tax, okay, and the phrase that they've been using on the papers now is that tax is paid at 20%, all right, on the first whatever amount, okay? So they'll say to you, tax is paid at 20% on the first, in this case we'll say €1,900, all right? And then they'll say to you, the remainder is at, say for example, 40%, okay? So our job then is, say if they tell us that the gross income was 2,100. When we do that, okay, what we need to set up then is, so our standard tax, 1,900 at 20%, and then the higher will come along, we'll say 2,100 minus that 1,900 euro, okay, and that's going to be at your 40%, okay? So that's what they do, okay? And that's the little step that you need on it then. So we're keeping an eye on that. Quick question there, does it matter if you forget the euro sign? So sometimes it depends on the marking scheme, okay? In 2024, okay, they were saying to accept the correct answer without units, all right? What we have to remember though when we're doing this question is sometimes, say if the distinctions were running really, really high, what they'll do is they'll penalise you for things like not having the units in, different things like that. So my advice would be to do your best to try and get the units in every single time, okay? You can see 2024, it wasn't the end of the world because they weren't penalising you for not having them there, all right? But you never know what way a paper is going to be answered. So if it was running really, really high with distinctions and higher merits, they might go back and rejig the marking scheme. So we just need to keep an eye on that, okay? So 183,250 as your answer there. Oh yeah, that's my handwriting there, sorry. So 1832. Okay, so as we look back, because it was 6750 here. Thanks a million. So change your little year 5 there. And then year 50. Perfect, great stuff. Okay, so you can see then the way they can build it up. Okay, so the standard tax, keeping an eye there, okay? The tax that's paid on the first 1,900, and then if you bump that up, okay, so say if they tell you that you earn above that, okay? But the wording that they've been using on the papers is tax paid on the first 1,900, and then the remainder is taxed at 40%, okay? So we're keeping an eye there all the time as we go through it. Now, a couple of things in terms of the workings on that, all right? Why are we laying them out like this, all right? So your teachers have probably said to you about the way it's marked to make sure you put down all your full workings because of low partial credit and high partial credit, all right? So for example, if we take the tax one, all right? So what they had said to the examiners there was, think of this as there being 3 steps, okay? Getting the gross tax, all right? Subtracting your gross tax from your gross income and dealing with the tax credit. So there were 3 different steps, all right? And then what they said was, if you got any of those 2 steps correct, okay? So if you managed to get your gross tax correct, or you managed to subtract the gross tax from the net income, or you dealt with the tax credit, you were immediately on 7 out of 10. So that's 70%, okay? So it's really, really important that we lay this out properly as we go through it, all right? So they're the basic little things on that one, all right? And then they moved in to have a nice little financial question at the very end of it then, okay? So they're asking you about the interest that's going to be earned, and then they're going to look at the total amount that's going to be in an account after 2 years, all right? So if we take a quick read down through this, and I'll keep an eye, there's a few more questions coming in there, and I'll go through them. Is there a limit to the amount of people who can get distinctions? Hard to know. That's kind of more of the SEC on that one, okay? Like they say that it follows kind of a normal distribution, like a bell curve. So we're going to make sure that we do everything we can, okay? Because if we have the stuff right, they can't take the marks away from us. So we're going to push on, and that's why we're going to get everything in exactly like this. So we won't need to worry about that. We'll be one of the ones getting that distinction. So Tomas puts 2,500 into a special savings account. This account offers interest at a rate of 3.2% per year for 2 years, compounded annually, and Tomas does not put any money in or take any money out of the account over the 2 years, okay? So it's going to stay there for the full 2 years. That's what we're looking at in this case, all right? So what's going to happen here, okay? Now you just need to be careful with the way this is worded, okay? And I think this kind of catches people sometimes. So this account offers a rate of 3.2% per year for 2 years. Okay, so it's going to earn 3.2% per year. That's the first thing. All right, it's compounded annually, and Tomás does not put any money in or take any money out of the account over the 2 years. So how much interest will he earn in the first year? All right, so you're starting it off. Now, the first thing is converting your percentage into a decimal. All right, I think that's one that kind of catches students, especially if they're using the formula that's in the table. So if you go to your tables, all right, and I'm just going to bring them up here and transfer in the part. So in the financial section of the tables, all right, they give you a little formula here that you can use for your compound interest. So I'm just going to copy that in for us so as we have it. So it would be page 30 in your maths tables that you can use. And just over to the side here, just have a quick look. All right. So they give us this formula here, and we have F is our final value, okay? P is the amount we have invested, all right? And then I is our rate of interest. Just remember, when you use your rate of interest in that formula, okay, we need it in decimal form, all right? So if you were going to use that formula, that 3.2% in decimal form will be 0.032. Okay, you divide that by 100 to get it into decimal form. All right, just keep an eye on that to make sure you're okay as you go through it. So we're coming along, and in the first year, okay, how much interest will Tomás earn? So all we're doing is we're coming along and we're taking our 2,500, that's what he's put into the account, and you're getting 3.2% of that. So you can multiply it by 0.032, or you can use 3.2 in a percentage, putting on your calculator, whatever way you've been practicing that in class, okay? So you come along 2,500 and by your 0.032, and that gives us €80, okay? And we're going to put the euro sign in it because we want to make sure we have everything there, okay? Now, get as much workings down on the page as possible, okay? Because that's going to help us with our partial credits if we had some sort of little mistake, all right? Then work out the total amount in the account after the 2 years. So now we're looking at the total amount. So this is where we can use our formula. The final value is equal to the principal, so the amount we invested, times 1 plus I to the power of t. So this is the initial amount invested. And then this is my rate of interest. And then the number of years in this case. So all we're doing is subbing into this formula. So the final value is equal to, I have my 2,500 by 1 plus 0.032 to the power of 2. And you can work that out then, all right? So 2,500 multiplied by 1.032 all to the power of 2. So you have €2,662 and 56 cents, okay? Now, in class, you might be doing that where you do it on a per year basis. So you might calculate year one, okay? And add on your interest of 80. So you have 2,580. So then when it comes to year two, the amount you've invested is 2,580, and that's going to earn another 3.2%, okay? And that's absolutely fine to do it that way as well, okay? So you take your 2,580 and multiply by your 1.032, okay? So either method is absolutely fine there. Okay, and again, we get our euro sign in on it to make sure we're picking up the maximum marks as we go through it every single time. All right. So again, in terms of how that is going to be marked, okay, if you treat it as as parts, okay? So part 1 and 2 were marked together here, all right? So it was getting a total of 10 marks. So what are they actually doing here, okay? To get low partial credit, work of any merit, okay? So you're converting your percentage into your decimal and showing that you know to multiply it. Even if you get the 80 wrong, okay? That's getting you onto 4 out of 10, okay? Setting up your formula here and some correct substitution into it, that's work of merit, okay? So you're on 40% there. To get up to the 60%, because it was 0, 4, 6, 8, 10, to get up to 6 out of 10 then, so you had to get one part fully correct. So if you had the €80 there, you got the first part correct, okay? You're straight away on to 60%. So it's so important that you don't look at it and say, oh my God, I'm not sure how to do the second part, I'm going to do nothing, okay? You just keep going with it like that, okay? And you keep picking up the partial credits as you go through it, okay? Okay, so in the exam, okay, any of these questions, all right, what they do on the questions on the junior cycle paper is they give you your suggested time for any of these, because they don't give you the marks on it, okay? Generally speaking, what we used to do when it was the older system was we used to say divide by 2, and that gave us the amount of time if we knew the number of marks. So they give you a suggested time here as you're going through them, okay? So what I would do is I'd look at it and say, right, I have 10 minutes on this one, and I'm going to gauge where I'm going to kind of move through it with that, okay? So they will give you that as you go through it on the questions each time, all right? So question 4 then, we're coming along, all right? Now, this is a section that some students can find quite tricky, okay? Because I think it's your approach on them, all right? So the first part here, they're saying to you, Kira's making an orange drink. The orange drink is made by mixing concentrate and water. The ratio of concentrate, to water is 1:4, okay? Now with ratios, so a quick note on that, all right? With ratios, all right, we have to think of parts, okay? Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. So you come along, right, and they're saying to you in this question, the ratio is 1:4. So what that means is for every 1 part concentrate I pour into the glass, I have to pour 4 times as much water, okay? So if you were to look at it, okay, so say if you had the glass here, you'd have one little part down at the bottom, all right, and that's going to be the concentrate, and then you fill it up with water, so you'd have 4:1. That's what they mean by that, okay? So there are 5 parts here. That's what they're saying, okay? And that's the trick to this. And then treat it as a fraction. So 1/5 of it and 4/5 of it, okay? So that's the method that we use on that. So this is a 2024 JC exam, just a quick question came in there, okay? So 1/5 and 4/5, and then you're just going back, okay? Now, just make sure you're answering what's asked though. So it makes 15 litres of the orange drink. Work out how many litres of concentrate Kira uses to make the drink. So you're coming along and you're saying, if she ends up with 15 litres, all right, 1/5 of that is concentrate. Okay, so all we're doing is saying 15 divided by 5, so 3 litres. In order to make 15 litres, she had to use 3 litres of concentrate, okay? Now, how could they change this around, okay? That's not too bad the way they've asked that question. They could work in reverse though, okay? They could have come along and said to us that that's our ratio, okay? Keep the same ratio. So they could give the ratio 1:4, and then they could tell us Kira used 5 litres of concentrate. And then they could say, what was the total? okay? So this time they've changed it, okay? Instead of giving us the total and asking us to work out the concentrate like they did here, they're saying to us, well, actually, she used 5 litres of concentrate, so how much did she have in total? So this time we'd have to come along and say, same approach, 1:4 gives me 5 parts. So 1/5 this time is equal to 5 litres. So if 1/5 is equal to 5 litres, the full 5/5 is equal to 5 litres by 5. So I'd end up with 25 litres in total, okay? So it's just a handy way for them to change it around, okay? Like, it's very unlikely that they'll give you the exact same style of question on the 2025 paper, but they could use the same idea, examine ratios again, but just change it up slightly, that we have to work in a slightly different way with it, all right? So they're the little things that we want to keep an eye, because that makes your study so much more effective. You're saying, okay, I am studying 2024, but how is it going to help me then for future exam questions? Right, the next little part on this. So she sells glasses of the orange drink for 20 cents each, and each glass contains 250 mils of the drink. Right, so that's going to be important. Each glass contains 250 mils. Now she sells 10 litres altogether, all right? And the total cost was €5.50. And then they get to actually asking you the question, work out her profit as a percentage of the total cost. And this key part here, do not ignore this, to 1 decimal place, okay? They are the things that students leave out, okay? So just to preempt a question on this one, if you don't round correctly on this particular one, they will dock you marks, okay? So sometimes they can be nice about the units. You might not have to have a euro sign in, but on this one, it's very much in the marking scheme, we are going to dock you if you don't round this properly, okay? So our first thing is to figure out how many glasses she actually sells, okay? So each glass contains 250 millilitres. So now our job is to come along and say, well, look, how many millilitres are going to go into this, okay? So when we talk about our 10 litres, all right, I need to convert that to millilitres first. So that's going to be 10,000 millilitres, okay? So I have my total and I'm showing that, all right? Now, if each glass contains 250, I'm saying 10,000 divided by my 250, that gives me 40 glasses. And again, you're showing your examiner step by step that you know what you're doing, okay? So first thing we did, we converted the 10 litres into millilitres. Second thing, we found out the number of glasses, okay? Let's get our sales value then. So her sales, 40 glasses, and she's charging 20 cents per glass, okay? So what is she actually bringing in here? So 40 by her 0.2, and again, you'll see me going for the calculator there. Do not do those in your head, okay? Because when you're under pressure, you could write down anything there. So €8. Now, the total cost was $5.50. So I'm going to put that in directly below it, and I'm going to get my profit figure here. So your profit then, your 8 minus your 5.50, okay? So coming in €2.50 profit there. But don't forget to answer what you've actually been asked in this question. So it wants your profit as a percentage of the total cost. So your last little step on that. So you're going to go profit over cost. So your €2.50 divided by the 5.50, and it's multiplied by 100/1 to convert it into your percentage. Okay, so you start it off, so it's your 250 divided by 550, and you're going to multiply that by 100/1. So you can see there that it's 45.45 percent. Now, what does it say to do? correct to one decimal place. So that's approximately 45.5%. Okay, and that last little part is really important. Okay, when you key that into your calculator, you end up with 500 over 11, and then when you change it on your calculator, it's 45 recurring. All right, so it's 45.5%. So just make sure that you're clearing that each time. Okay, that you check what it says. Is it to one decimal place? Is it to a significant figure? What is it for? Okay, and then you go from there. And then part C on this question, they move away completely from percentages and different things like that, and they're asking you to get the volume, okay, of a shape, of a cylinder specifically here. So I think that's the thing with the junior cycle paper, it just jumps from topic to topic, okay. There's a little link in it in that, like, yeah, the glass was a cylinder, okay, but then we need to be able to move really quickly through the topics, all right? So that's why it's really important that you're practicing the exam questions so as you get used to that, the movement between them. And that's what we'll be doing over the next few weeks, looking at that as to how we do it, okay? Why is it 550 over the 250? Okay, because here, this is just your subtracting, okay? Just a quick question there. On the layout there, I'm just saying €8 minus the 550 gives me €2.50, and then to get the percentage, €2.50 divided by 550. So that's just your little line to show that you've subtracted these two. Okay, that's all that's happening there to work out. So you're subtracting. All right. So the sales minus the cost is always going to give you your profit figure. All right, and then take the profit figure and put it over the cost and multiply by 100 over 1. Right. So each glass is approximately the shape of a cylinder with a diameter of 6 centimeters and a height of 10. So again, you're going back to your tables, all right? So get used to using the tables. So if you look at the tables, so back at the very start, you have all your formulas for your 3D shapes. So we'll take the cylinder here, okay? And again, let's just copy this in so as we have it. So a little bit of an explanation on this. You're doing great on the questions coming in, so keep those up. So when we look at the 3D shapes, all right, a couple of things on this that I've noticed over the years with students, they sometimes forget what's actually happening here. When they talk about A here, that area, that's the curved surface area. Okay, so what you'd put your hand around, the part that you'd actually put your hand around is the curved surface area, okay? If it said the total surface area though, you'd have to remember that you have a circle on the top and you have that circle on the bottom as well that would need to be added, okay? So curved surface area means the part that, you know, if you were to hold the glass, the part that you're putting your hand around, that's the curved surface area. And now we're interested in the volume. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do with any of these questions is get the formula down. So whatever they are asking you, you're going to get it down on the page. Now it says nearest centimeter cubed, so we're picking up on that as well. So we come back and we're saying, right, the volume. So the formula for the volume, pi r squared h, all right? Now this question has given us the diameter, all right? So a little bit of work. So we have to come along and say, right, well, the diameter is twice the radius. So I need to have that. So the radius is equal to 6 divided by 2. So I get 3. And then I'm ready to sub in. So pi 3 squared times the height, which is 10. Okay. Now again, you don't need to worry about having your units in until the very end. Okay. So they haven't specified what you have to let pi equal to. So you're using the button on your calculator, okay? You're not rounding, you're not using 3.14, okay? You are using the button here. So you have pi multiplied by the radius squared multiplied by 10. So when you key that into your calculator, you're going to get 90 pi, and then it doesn't say to give your answer in terms of pi, so we do need to press that little SD button, you know, where we change it, the format button. So that's going to come back in as 282.7433. Okay. Now, to the nearest centimeter squared though. nearest centimetre cubed because it's volume, sorry. So look at it, and the 7 tells me I'm going to go up. So it's going to be approximately, that little squiggly equals there is my approximation sign. So 283 centimetres cubed. Okay, so I have my 283 centimetres cubed because they told me to give it to the nearest centimetre cubed. Now, just a little tip, don't highlight your answers with a highlighter on the day because it can affect the scanning of it. Okay, so if you want to make sure your examiner knows what you've done, absolutely underline it or put a box around it if you want to, but avoid actually highlighting it. Okay, just a little tip there. So again, that particular question, all right, it was a 20-mark question, all right. Just going back to the question that was asked there about timings, okay? So 20-mark question, so you can see like 10 minutes, all right? So you can get an idea. It's not always strictly the case, but like if it's saying 10 minutes, you can say roughly around 20 marks, okay? 5 minutes, roughly around 10 marks. So that'll help you judge how much time you should be spending on these questions. And like if it says it's a 5-mark or a 5-minute question, don't spend 10 minutes because you get bogged down in something. You need to keep moving with it as well. But again, just to kind of reassure you, the marking on that, okay? So to get high partial credit on that last one, okay? So to get 70% of part C, if you had fully substituted into that formula, but you didn't work it out, you were getting 7 out of 10, all right? So you will all be able to get that formula from the tables. So your pi r squared h, okay? So if you have the correct formula with anything subbed in, now bear in mind they gave us the height. So even if you have pi r squared 10, all right, you're on 50%, 5 out of 10, okay? So that's what we're looking at here. How do you build it up? How do you build up your confidence, okay? Because there's nothing worse than coming out of the exam and saying, oh, I left that blank. And you know that feeling when you get it back then you go, oh, actually, I could have got loads of stuff in there, but you just kind of doubt yourself a little bit. So that's what we want to look at here, making sure we're okay. So moving on to question 5 then. So we're looking here at sets, okay? So a couple of things on this then as we go through it. We can either be talking about the cardinal number of a set, so that's the number of elements that are in it, or we can be actually putting the elements into the set itself. So we need to keep an eye as to what's happening here. So the first thing they're asking, they say to us that A and B are 2 sets, so complete the tables below by shading in the given sets in the diagram. So A intersection B, so where do they overlap, okay? So that's the first thing that we want to put in. So A intersection B, that's where they have overlapped there. So the elements are in both, in A and B. A less B then. So we're saying everything in A, but we want to take away anything that's in B. So here we have it here, okay? Do they give you the formula tables? Yep, give us the formula tables in the exams. Yep, they do, okay? So that's the first part there, okay? Now, if I were you, I would have a look at that and I'd say, right, I need to be really sharp on those diagrams, okay? Do I know what A intersection B is? Do I know what A less B is? Do I know what B less A is? Do I know what A union B is? Okay, so I would take a look at those and make sure I can apply them. If they've asked those two in 2024, what might they ask? How could they change it up a little bit in 2025? All right, so next part then, the sets U, P and Q and S are as follows, all right? So U is the natural numbers from 1 to 10. So that's our universal set. So that rectangle is the universal set. And they're saying they are our numbers 1 to 10. So the natural numbers, and that's absolutely fine, okay? Then they tell us that the set P is equal to 3, 5, 6, 9. The set Q is equal to 3, 5, 10. And then they say to us that factors of 10, that's what the set S is, okay? So we come along then and we're saying, right, what are the factors of 10? I need to get that down on the page first, okay? So factors of 10. So your nice little curly brackets there, and we're saying, right, what's happening? If I multiply 1 by 10, there are 2 factors. And then if I multiply 2 by 5, there's another 2 factors. 3 doesn't go into 10 evenly, 4 doesn't go into it evenly, and then I'm back to 5. So now I have my factors. How do you know what formula to use based on the question? Okay, so with the formula based on the question, okay, I'm assuming it's going back to your question here. So what you do is you take a look and you're saying, right, what shape am I actually being asked, okay? So I would do that. I'd come along and I'd say, right, the shape, it is a cylinder here. Therefore, I'm going to be going back and getting the formulas associated with the cylinder. The next thing I looked at was it's the volume. So I know, if I look back here again, it's V, okay? It's the volume formula, not the curved surface area, okay? So very much you're highlighting the parts of the question, all right? And then you go from there. So a junior cycle, they will give you the shape. There won't be anything trying to catch you there that you might go with the wrong shape on it, all right? So don't worry about that. But that's the way to do it, okay? So good question there. How do you know which one to use, okay? So highlight the key parts in the question. I can't stress that enough. If you put a bit of time when you go into the paper to highlight those parts as you read through the question, it'll make such a difference for you, okay? So next little part on this, complete the Venn diagram, okay? My advice on this for any of these Venn diagrams, okay? I'll move this onto the screen for you now. So with the Venn diagrams, you fill from the inside out. Okay? So you always go from the inside out, all right? So we're coming along and we're saying, right, copy and complete the Venn diagram by writing each element. Now, we are putting elements in, so elements get a dot, okay? So if you look here, look at 8, that has a little dot on it. If I just came along and put, say, 6 here without a dot, that means the number of elements in that part is 6, okay? So I need a little dot on it when I'm putting the elements themselves in, okay? So I just need to keep an eye on that, all right? So how am I going to fill this in, all right? So the first thing I need to do is I need to check what's common to all 3 sets, all right? And again, this is just about your procedure on this question, okay? You'll find that this is actually quite easy as you go through it, if you get your little procedures right. So 5, 5, and 5. So the common element there is 5. Now let's look and see, is there anything that's common to P and Q, okay, in addition to that 5, okay? So 5 is common to P, Q, and S, but now I just want the ones that are just common to P and Q, okay? So I can see here that 3 is also there. So up here, okay? So the number 3 is in P and Q only, all right? Next thing, I want to look here and I want to see, is there anything common between Q and S that isn't also common to P, okay? So Q and S, same approach again. I'm just coming along and I'm saying Q is here, 10, and it's also an S. So I put it in, 10 goes in here, all right? Then I want to check what else has to happen here, okay? So is there any number left in P that I haven't taken into account yet? So I have the 3, I have the 5, I don't have my 6 though. So I need to come along and put 6 into the set P, all right? Everything from Q is in, so I have nothing else to fill in from Q. And then S, I still have 1 and 2, okay? So when I put those in, I have 1 and I have 2, all right? And then my last thing to check is, do I have all of the universal set? So the universal set is the natural numbers from 1 to 10, all right? So I have 1, 2, 3, okay? 4 is already outside, that's fine. 5, 6, I don't have 7 accounted for yet, so I need to put 7 in. 8 is here, 9 is here, and 10 is here. So now I have absolutely everything in that I need to put in, okay? And that's the system. You fill from the inside out and then you check that you have everything from the universal set accounted for. Next little part, list the elements of the set P intersection Q intersection S. So from my diagram, 5, that's the element that's common. List the elements of P less Q. So P less Q, remember from your shaded diagram, you'd have it. So elements of P, but I want to take Q out of it. So what am I dealing with there? So just my 6 and 9. That's all I'm saying there. Right? Now, think about what they could ask us. So how could they change this around? So on your mock paper, on your 2025 paper, what could they be looking at? The shaded regions, okay? They could come along and say, what's A union B going to look like? Okay, so what would I need to shade in? So A union B, all of A, and all of B. Okay, just do one more just so you have an idea. They could come along. We'll keep it simple again, universal set. A and B. What if they gave us this? B and that little dash. Can you remember what that means? So B complement. So everything except B. Okay, so you're talking about everything except B. So leave B on its own, okay, and you're going to shade in absolutely everything else, okay? So you're coming along, and there we have B complement. So once you see that little dash on it, or they can use a C either, you're talking about everything except for B. All right, now obviously yours will look a lot nicer shaded in, okay? So that's what we're looking at there. We're picking up our marks every single time, okay, and we're looking at what could we change around, what could they ask differently, what could crop up there, okay? So question 6 in that paper then, all right? So a chocolate bar is in the shape of a prism, okay? And so they've taken Toblerone, all right? So the front and back faces are each in the shape of equilateral triangles with side lengths of 3 centimeters. The 3 other faces are each in the shape of rectangles that are 9 centimeters in length, as shown, all right? And then they ask us to complete an accurate net of the prism below by drawing in the 4 missing faces, okay? And then they give us this little piece here, okay, that you could easily miss. Each small square in the grid has a length of 1 centimeter. That's what they are telling us, all right? So if we have to draw the net of this, all right, so the net basically, just remember what that is, you're folding out the shape, all right? So you're folding out the shape. So all we're doing is we're coming along and we're saying, right, there has to be a rectangle here. Now, there is a temptation to come along and just randomly draw a rectangle and head on, okay? But they told us that the length is 9 centimeters. So we need to check that we actually have 9 boxes drawn, okay? So we come along and we can see there's 4 and then here we're 9. So we need to stop when we get to here. Now we know that the triangle is 3, so that's fine. Matches here, okay? Now think about that shape. There are 3 of those sides, so I need 3 of those rectangles. And then I'm going to do one down below. Now remember, when you're drawing this, you're going to be drawing it accurately on a page. I'm trying to keep an eye on this writing on the screen, okay? So, and then, like if you think about it, this little triangle folds up, this little triangle folds up, and then this one comes back up here, okay? Sorry, this one is slightly off. So it would only be about there, okay? Gone too far. And then it will come to there, okay? So you're just keeping an eye on that, okay, to make sure that you have it drawn properly, all right? Now, depending on how you go about drawing the net, okay, you might have something different to the person sitting beside you, okay? But they will accept any correct version of that, okay? Now, a couple of things on this, all right? 7 marks for this particular question, but again, how are you going to get to the 70%, all right? So if you have the 3 faces drawn correctly, all right, or if you drew all of them, but you had the incorrect scale, so if you didn't have it at the 9 centimeters and the 3 centimeters, okay, there'd be a deduction there, but you'd still get 70%, okay? So don't give up on it, all right? To get low partial credit, so any work of merit, okay? So a rough sketch drawn of what the net might look like, or even one of these. So one rectangle, so just as I'm shading in there, even if you got one of those drawn, you were on 50%, 5 out of the 10, okay? So that's not bad, all right? Okay, question 7 then. Now, in this one here, they're examining algebra, but they're bringing in another little piece on it, okay? It's doing it kind of using our geometry again, all right? Making sure that we know what's actually happening on this. So 2 rectangular solids, a cube and a cuboid, are shown in the diagram below, and they're not to scale, all right? They're just telling you that you can't take these measurements as true. So the edges of a cube have a length of x, where x is an element of R, so it's just telling you that x is a real number, okay? Sometimes students get kind of caught up on this. They're just saying x is a real number, so all right? So you could have decimals, fractions, different things like that, okay? And then the cuboid B has dimensions of 5, 6, and y. So we have an unknown. We don't know what that side actually measures, okay? And they start off and they tell you that the volume of A is equal to 216, all right? So they're coming along and they're saying to us that the volume of this, so we're going to get the volume of the cube written down, okay? So the volume is my length by my width by my height. So x times x times x. So we are saying x cubed is my volume there, okay? So any work of merit is going to get us on 2. This was a 5-mark question, okay? So we're already on 2 out of 5 here, all right? So we've passed the question, we're on 40%. They told us it's equal to 216, and look what they're asking us to find, the value of x. So we're going to come along and we're going to say x cubed is equal to 216, and then my last step, get the cubed root of 216, okay? So on your calculator, you get the cubed root, and that is 6 centimeters. So little things like that. Make sure you know where the button is to square. Make sure you know where the square root button is. Make sure you know how to get the cubed root. All those little things that are going to make your life easier going into the exam. All right. Next thing, show that the surface area of B is equal to 22y plus 60 centimeters squared. Okay. So the key thing on this, for your surface area, okay, of a cuboid, so each face appears twice. Okay, and that's the key thing there. So the surface area, when you go to set that up, we're going to take each side. So we're going to say, now, what I would advise my students to do is write in as much information as you can. So you know that the height is 5, but that's written at the back there. Okay, so put the 5 in here as well, so as you can see it. That's 5. Okay, you know that the distance here is 6, so put that in as well. And here you know that's y, okay? Because it makes it a little bit easier then to see. So you can say, well, look, I can get the dimensions of the top. It's just going to be 6 by y. I can get the dimensions of this side here. It's going to be 5 by y. And then the side is going to be 5 by 6. And you set it up that way so as you can see really easily what's happening on each of these. So when we set it up, we're coming along, 2 of each face, okay? So 2 of our 5 times y, 2 of our 6 times 5, and then there's going to be 2 of our 6 times y. All right. So as we look at the cuboid, that's my 5 by y. Just make it a little bit smaller on your screen for a sec. 2 of those, 2 of the sides, so 2 of the 6 by 5, and then a top and a bottom. Okay, so tidying it up then, we have 10 y plus 2 by 6 by 5 is going to give me 60 plus, and I have my 2 by 6 is 12 by y, 12y. So I have 22y plus 60, and it's centimetres squared. Okay, so nice and handy, but just take your time on it. Okay, key thing was that we had to remember that each face appears twice. Then they tell you that the surface area of B is equal to 269 centimetres squared. So you're taking the equation you've set up, okay, and you're letting it equal to 269. So we're saying 22y plus 60 is equal to 269. Now, you're trying to find the value of y, so you're getting y on its own. So I need to get rid of the numbers on the left hand side. So whatever method your teacher might be using with you there, they might say letters on the left, numbers on the right, okay? So 22y, you don't want that 60 there, so you're going to subtract 60 from each side. Remember, whatever you do to the left hand side, you must do it to the right hand side. That's the rule for equations. Sorry, that should be 269 minus 60. Okay, so whatever I do to the left, I must do to the right. Okay, so I took 60 away from the left hand side, so I had to take it away from the right hand side. It has to balance, okay, it's an equation. So that leaves me with 209. Now 22y is equal to 209. How do I get that y on its own? Divide both sides by 22. So again, you're setting it up every single time for yourself, so as you're getting maximum marks as you go through it. Because you could see earlier on with the tax one, when I just wrote down a number wrong, okay? So I had it correct on my calculator, wrote it down wrong, but it would mean that the examiner would go back and say, oh yeah, perfect. That's what you do there. That's how you get that answer, okay? And they'd know that it was just a glitch that I happened to transfer it wrong when I was under pressure in the exam. So the 22 goes into the 22, so I'm left with y is equal to 209 divided by 22. And then I come along and I'm saying, right, 209 divided by 22, so it leaves me with 9.5. Now just be careful, we're dealing with centimetres here, so get the units in, okay? Now again, some years they will be really strict and you'll have to have the units in, some years you won't, okay? But you don't want to take that gamble because you don't know in advance what way that's going to be marked, okay? So we want to make sure we're accurate each time, okay? Last little part then, and I think this was a particularly tricky one, okay? So it was a particularly tricky question, all right? And then they came along and they only gave 5 marks for it anyway, all right? So it ended up being one of those ones that you could have spent ages trying to get it out if you didn't actually see the correct approach on it, and then all for 5 marks, okay? So you just need to be careful with that you don't spend an excessive amount of time. So the area of 3 faces of a different cuboid are shown on the diagram, okay? And the dimensions of this cuboid are L centimetres by M centimetres by P centimetres, where L, M and P are whole numbers, okay? And you have to work out the volume of the cuboid and give your answer in centimetres cubed, okay? So they've told us what the surface areas are, okay? So I'm going to go through one of the methods that you could have used on this, okay? Just to show you. So a lot of people, first of all, they would have said, right, to get my volume, they would have put down their formula for volume and they would have said, right, the volume of this is going to equal to L times M times P, which is correct, okay? So L times M times P, and they know that that is the volume. That's what they're looking for, okay? And then your next thing is, well, how am I going to get those values of L, M and P, all right? So I come along and I say, right, well, I know that L times M is equal to 96 centimetres squared, okay? And if I look here, okay, I have P here, and I know that that length is L as well. So I know that L times P is equal to 32 centimetres squared, all right? So what you could have done then is you could have come along and said, well, look, I need to find out from my formula, I need to get a value for P. Okay, so how am I going to get that? All right. So I could have said, well, look, P is equal to 32 over L. All right. And then where was I going to go with that? Okay, so I have 32 over L. What could I do to try and work out the rest of that? So I could come along then and I could say, well, look, instead of trying to work out all of them, I'm going to go back to what my formula is. Okay, so I know the volume is L times M times P. So I'm going to sub in. So L by M, that first little part there, I know is 96. Okay, my P value then is 32 over L. So what do I do next? Okay, so this is where I think it was a little bit tricky for people then, because they had to kind of move around it until they could get the values that worked. Okay, so you had to go back and you had to use your last one then, where you said, well, look, what's happening with the top of this? Okay, so here I have a P and here I have an M. So what can I sub in there? All right, so you came along and you said, well, look, P times M, what's that going to give me? It's going to give me 48, all right? So you had to move through it like that to try and get your values as you went through it, okay? So a lot of students kind of headed off that direction, that they were kind of multiplying them out and multiplying them out all the time, okay? But I want to show you one little trick, what you could have done here, okay? So if a question came up like this again, all right? They started off and they showed you this and they said L, M, okay? Because they gave you this area. So they've said LM, okay? And then they gave us PM, so the top. And then we also had LP, okay? So we had LM, LP, and PM, all right? So what we could have done here, and this was rules of indices, is actually what they were looking at here, okay? And this is what made it really tricky for students. We could have said, well, that's actually L squared. Now I'll write this out fully for you. So you could have said that's L, M, P, M, L, P, okay? So that's L squared, M squared, P squared. And then that's L, M, P, all to be squared, okay? So really, really tricky, I felt, okay? And what you did then was you let it equal to all three of these multiplied. So you had your 48, and just make sure you can see it on the screen there. So your LM, your 96, your PM value, your 48, and then your LP value, your 32. Okay, and when you worked that out then, you had 96 by 48 by 32. So 147, 456. And then remember, to get LMP on its own, you have to get the square root of all of that. 147, 456. Sorry, make sure that's on the screen for you there. So LMP, and you were talking about that coming in then as the square root of all of that, okay? So a really tricky question, and it was only coming in back in for 5 marks, okay? So I suppose what I want to show you on that is this can happen, okay? You can move down through the question, but what you'll see is you'll get to a point where you go, okay, I still have an unknown there. What am I going to do, okay? And that can happen on the last parts of some of these questions where they're pushing you a little bit further, okay? But again, don't give up hope when you're doing the paper, okay? You kind of say to yourself, okay, look, take it step by step, okay? And again, 5 marker, low partial credit. So for any work of any merit, okay? So if you had written down one pair of the factors, So if you'd written down L by M or L by P, okay, you were coming in and you were getting 2 marks out of 5 straight away. Okay, so you're already on your 40%. And I think that's the key thing now. In the run up to the mocks, that you're not panicking about things like this. If you look at an exam question and go, oh my God, that's incredibly difficult, you can see where you can pick up those marks as you go through it. Okay? Right, so next one here then, question 8. So the graph of the functions g of x for -2 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3, and x is an element of R, and we have to write down the value of g of 3. Okay? So all this means is when x is equal to 3, okay, what is the y value? That's what they're saying, okay? So what we do is we use our graph, okay? Now this says to use your graph to answer it, okay? So you have to be careful when it says that. If it says use your graph, we need to show them what we have done, okay? So all we're doing is we're going to our graph and we're saying, right, x is equal to 3. Go to 3 and go up and see where it hits the graph. So it hits it there and read it across. So I get a y value of 2. So that's simple, okay? Write down the value of x when g of x is equal to 1. So what does that mean? If it says g of x equals 1, they're just saying when the y value is equal to 1. So again, same approach. Go to 1 on your y value, okay? Draw your line across, see where it hits the graph, and bring it down. Read it down off the x-axis then. So we have x equal to -1. All right, so that's all we're doing on these each time. And then it asks us to graph the function y equal to g of x minus 2. All right, now this is a translation of a function. Okay, so what it's doing is if you take your function and you subtract 2, okay, all the y values drop 2. Okay, sorry. Or another way we could say that is we say that the graph shifts down by 2. Okay, so we're going to take this graph, okay, and I'm going to take 3 points on the graph, all right, and I'm going to drop all of them down by 2. So dropping it down by 2, dropping it down by 2, and take that point there and drop it down by 2. And all I need to do then is just with my ruler, just connect those back up. So I'm coming along, and now I have my graph in, okay, and I'm going to label it. So g of x minus 2. Okay, so when you see that you're subtracting 2 from the function, all you're doing is dropping it down by 2. If you're adding it to, you'd be shifting it upwards by 2, okay? So that's what we're keeping an eye on there each time, all right? Key thing here though, because this is really easy to pick up the marks, g of x, okay? So the x value here, 3. So g of 3, go to 3 and draw your line up until it hits the graph, okay? And then you're perpendicular across to the y-axis and read it off. Okay, that's what you're doing each time on that. Okay, so just keeping an eye on the chat there if there's anything that you want to ask me about, okay? Because I know this is tough going, okay? It's a Sunday afternoon and you're working away on this, so we'll keep going. All right, so question 9 then, so you're getting into your coordinate geometry. Now remember, with coordinate geometry, this should be a lovely question where you're saying to yourself, right, there's so much of it is going to come directly from the tables. Okay, so what do we have in the tables? What formulas do we have? So if you go back, and it's going to be on page 18 of the tables for you, okay? So you'll have the formulas that you have there, okay? So all the various different formulas, and we can go through them. So let's have a look. So we start off, and the coordinate diagram below shows the line segment AC, all right? And the points B, 4, 1, and 3, 3. Now remember, okay, so little things like this, the x coordinate comes first and then the y coordinate. They're little things that you can forget if you haven't been practicing it for a while, okay? So write down the coordinates of A and then the coordinates of C. So remember, you're writing an xy coordinate, okay? So you need to have both, okay? You need to have the x and the y. So the first one there, your A point. So -1 for the x, +1 for the y coordinate. You're just reading it off. Okay, for C then, so 5 for the x, and then straight across, 4 for the y. All right, so that should be nice and simple. The next part then, they say to you that D is a point not shown, and D is the image of the point B under central symmetry in the point P. Okay, so central symmetry, what does that mean? So just over to the side. So if we're talking about central symmetry, okay, so what you do is you bring the point to the point of symmetry, and the same distance beyond. So let's look at what that actually looks like. Okay, so you bring it to the point of symmetry, all right, and you bring it the same distance beyond. So you're going to take your point B, you're going to bring it to P, and you're going to bring it the same distance beyond. Okay, so D is the image, so you label that D. Okay, so you brought it to the point P, and then you bring it the same distance beyond. That's what central symmetry is. Okay, so you were asked to plot and label the point D in the diagram, and then join the points A, B, C, and D to form the quadrilateral. Okay, so don't forget that little part. Okay, you have to form that quadrilateral. So you're coming along then, and you're just going to join those points. So A, B, C, and D. Okay. So your quadrilateral, and you have everything there. Okay. And then the question that comes with that then. So they're saying here that Kate says the quadrilateral is not a parallelogram, okay? And then you have to find AB and CD, okay? So what does that symbol there mean? So we're talking about the length, okay? So the length of AB and the length of CD, and use these values to explain why Kate is correct. So she is stating that it's not a parallelogram. So what they're actually examining here is, do you know what a parallelogram is? So what are your rules for a parallelogram? If it is a parallelogram, we know that opposite sides are equal in length. So opposite sides are equal in length. So we're going to come along and we're going to show that that's not the case. All right. So AB. First thing is, if you spot that you could actually just read off the length of AB, it goes from -1 to +4. It has a length of 5. Okay. That's brilliant if you spot that straight away. If you don't, you can use your formula to get it. Okay. And I'm going to show you the formula with CD anyway. So the length of AB is 5 units. The length of CD. So if we want to use this formula, okay, we take our formula directly from our tables. Now remember, you need to get that written down on the page, because any correct substitution into that formula is going to get you on your partial credits, which is what we want. All right, and then, sorry, just keeping an eye on the chat there. We're coming along and we're going to label our points. Okay, so the point C and the point D, and then we're going to sub in. All right. So take your point C. So directly from this 5, 4. And then your point D, which is the point that we graphed. So we know that that point there is going to be 2, 5. So we label them, x1, y1, x2, y2. Remember, you're trying to make sure you pick up maximum credit should anything go wrong when you're putting this together, all right? And then just subbing into the formula. So x2, so we have 2 minus 5 all to be squared plus y2, 5 minus 4 all to be squared. And we'll tidy it up here. So that's the square root of minus 3 all to be squared. And then I have the square root of the 1 as well, okay? So I tidy it up and I have 9 plus 1 root 10, okay? So 5 is not equal to root 10, therefore opposite sides not equal. All right, therefore Kate is correct. It's not a parallelogram, okay? So that's the process on that. You're showing it step by step as to what you did, all right? And really important that we kind of break it down like that, that you can see it. Again, that was coming in as a 15 mark question, all right? So quite high there, what you're doing on it. So make sure you're happy enough as you go through it, making sure everything is all right on it, okay? So question 10. So there's only a couple of questions left on this paper, but not to worry, we're going to be going through these anyway. So I'll keep going, I'll get another 1 or 2 questions done anyway. And as I said, any questions you have, keep them coming in. And question 1 and 2, I'm going to put those up anyway. Okay, they're pre-recorded, so you can have a look at those. Right, so question 10. What are they asking here? Again, coordinate geometry again, and they're saying to you, the equation of the line K is y equal to 2x plus 5. So what do we know about this? All right, so our notes on this. That's in the form y equal to mx plus c. So m is always my slope. Okay, so if I was looking at that, m is my slope, c is equal to my y-intercept. Okay, so when you start off and you look at things like that and you go, right, that might help me, okay, so that might trigger something straight away in the question, or it might make my life a little bit easier as I go through it. So let's look at what they've asked us. The first thing is to find the coordinates of the point P. Now, they have told us that it intersects the y-axis at 0, 5 and the x-axis at the point P. So what are they examining there? If it cuts the x-axis or it intersects the x-axis, your y value is equal to 0. So we're going to take our equation, okay, so K is y equal to 2x plus 5, so 0 is equal to 2x plus 5, tidy it up then. So we have 0 minus 5 is equal to 2x plus 5 minus 5, so we have 2x is equal to minus 5, x is equal to minus 2.5. Now just be careful, okay, you must give it back as a point, all right, so it has to be filled into this. So we have minus 2.50, okay? So we have it put back in. Then they tell us that the line N is perpendicular to the line K, and it goes through the point 0, 10, and find the equation of N. So what I would do, I would have this on a little flashcard and I would read through it before I go into the exam. The way this works, every single time you see to find the equation of a line, you know that you need 2 things. You need a point and you need a slope. All right? So you need a point and you need a slope to find this. All right? If you're using that format, it's the formula y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. All right? If we're using that format. Okay, that we need a point, we need a slope, that's the format that we're going to use, that's the formula we're going to use as well. All right, so we are told that this line is perpendicular to the line K. Now, what's the story with lines that are perpendicular? So the slopes of perpendicular lines, so I'd have this out. So the slope of a perpendicular line. Now remember, these are your quick little notes that you look at before you go into the exam. So the slope of a perpendicular line, okay, so you take the slope, so the given slope, and what do? We flip it and change the sign. Okay, so we're going to flip it and change the sign. Now, we know the reason we're doing that is because the two slopes have to multiply to give us -1, okay? And yet we could be asked to justify that, and that's absolutely fine. But for us, for our method, when we go into the exam, they say find the equation of a slope of a line that's perpendicular, flip it and change the sign. That's what you want to have, okay? So the line N, perpendicular to K, and goes through the point 0, 10. So there's our first thing. We have our point, okay? The first thing we need, we have the point there. And it's 0, 10. The next thing is our slope. Now it's perpendicular to K. So when we started this question, we came along and the first thing we did was we said, right, we're in the form y equal to mx plus c, and we said m is the slope. All right. So for that line K, y was equal to 2x plus 5. So the slope of K is just equal to 2. We could read it off straight away. We didn't have to do anything, okay? We were able to read it off straight away. So if I'm saying it's perpendicular to K now, and the slope of K is equal to 2, which is basically 2 over 1, that means the slope of my new line that I'm working out, so the slope of n, flip it and change the sign. So it becomes -1/2. And then I'm just subbing into my formula. So I label it x1, y1, and here's my m value. So y minus 10 is equal to -1/2 times x minus 0. Tidy it up, okay? Because it did ask to give our answer in the form ax plus by plus c. So what I would say is, look at what makes this slightly difficult, this fraction here. All right, so -1/2 x. And just get rid of it for yourself. Multiply both sides by 2. So if you multiply both sides by 2, you're going to have 2y minus 20 is equal to -x. And your last little step is to get it in this format. So it's jumping on the screen. Get it in the format ax plus by plus c equal to 0. So what am I going to do? I don't want that -x on the right hand side, so I add x to each side. X plus 2y minus 20 is equal to -x plus x. So they're gone. You're left with a 0, and then you have it. X plus 2y minus 20 equals 0. And that's your final answer on that. Okay, so that's what you're keeping an eye on to make sure that you're picking up the maximum marks on that. All right, so just before I finish up, all right, remember there's going to be another few sessions like this where we're going to go through the papers and we're going to build on questions. What I would do if I was you, I would go back on this and I would look and say, right, what are the kind of common things that are coming up? How can they change that for me when I go into the mock, when I go into the 2025 paper? And what's my process? You'll have seen that we're very conscious of, are we giving our answer correct in a number of decimal places? We had to be really careful that we picked out the correct part in each question to make sure we were answering what they were asked. And then the one thing that I would really love for you to take away from it is any of those questions that were particularly difficult, okay? So let's take this one here, all right? 5 marks. That was all that was going for it, okay? So we're keeping an eye and we're saying, right, we need to be careful that we don't go into the exam and panic and say, okay, right, I can't do this, I'm getting stuck here. And that moment where you go, no, I'm giving up, I'm not going to write anything. Okay, it's really key that you do that, because you could see back in some of the earlier questions then where you were picking up marks for any correct substitution into a formula. Okay, so this one here, for example, picking up the marks all along. So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure you're picking those up as you go through it, that you're not missing out on those vital marks. All right, so for the next one then, what we'll do is we'll start straight away the next day into question 11, all right? And then what we'll do is I'll take some questions from the 2023 and then I'll give you some additional questions as well. Just how could they change it around ever so slightly for us? All right. So any questions then that you might have just before we finish up, if you just want to pop them in the chat, I'll be able to answer them before I go offline, okay? And then the PDF of all of this will be made available to you so you can go through it as well, and you can go back through any of the questions and you can see the fully worked solutions, all right? So thanks everyone, and have a great week, and I will see you next time, all right?